sharing a studio in some capacity for like 17 years, 18 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
And this is what I was thinking about on the way into work this morning. So you remember when we were in the studio in Toronto?
Yeah,
and
right.
Everyone had like a stack of like reference material and inspirational books beside their desk.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your stack then, and what is it now?
Oh, if you remember, my stack then was like Jack Davis. That whole pile was like Jack Davis that we would
When
get
you were
at
doing
Dragon
Friday the
Lady.
13th?
Yeah,
It was
like
Jack Davis?
Yeah, it was Jack Davis, EC Horror, Mike Plug.
Oh,
a lot
really?
of that stuff.
I don't think I ever saw that.
Bernie Wrightson. Obviously, lots of Bernie Wrightson.
Saw
was
the
on
Bernie
the table.
Wrightson, yeah, but
yeah, like the Frankenstein book in the studio we got. Yeah, no, it was all that kind of stuff. It was all EC Horror comics because I wanted to get that like classic retro horror vibe to my Friday the 13th. You know, that's why it was like flat colors with like dot patterns and everything. And I remember when I put that comic out with DC, everyone like kind of like half people like got it and was like, that's so cool. And the other half are like, what's this cartoony shit? Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, so no one's like seen comics back then. You know, that era of Wildstorm where they were doing all the New Lines, right? So New Line Cinema, they had what? Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Lost Boys, remember? They had Lost Boys?
There's a Lost Boys.
There's a Lost Boys
Wildstorm
comic. Yeah, there's a Lost Boys. Did I show it to you?
I've seen the new one.
Yeah, like the hero in it is the sax player.
Oh, wait, yeah, okay,
Yeah, I showed you that. Which in hindsight is an amazing idea. He's like a vampire killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he believes. He still believes. Forever.
He'll never not believe.
Yeah, and he's the coolest looking guy ever. If I could get like my Tim maybe that's my Halloween costume coming up. Like
you got some work to do.
Yeah. I got to get on the roids. But yeah, no, that was the thing back then. But it was all EC horror, and I was really leaning into that. And a lot of people got it, and a lot of people didn't. But a lot of people still bring up that comic.
I said this to you the other day. I said I was not envious, but I noticed that your style is unmistakably you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's largely because if I think about your influences and those comics that were in your inspiration stack, there's no one else in the studio was reading that stuff.
No, I was like the only one that was into that stuff, for sure. And that came from when I was a kid. So when I was a kid and my dad left my mom, he would bring me to this like secondhand comic book shop or bookstore. And there was just walls and walls of comics, and like they would just be stacked, no bags and boards. This is actually pre-bags and boards. And they just like brrr, like this, and like the paper would all turn yellow because the guy in the shop smoked. So it was like a yellow wall of old comics. And I would just buy old comics in there. I would get like EC horror comics. I would get Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, which is where I fell in love with Buscema.
So they had superhero stuff there, and you just didn't.
I went for monsters.
Yeah,
I went for monsters. And I think when I actually hooked up with you guys at Raid, I was playing catch up. I hadn't read any Frank Miller. How old was I? 26?
We were young.
Yeah, I was like 26. I hadn't read any Frank Miller. I hadn't read any Alan Moore. I really missed most superhero things like completely, because when I hit 13, right before I was 13, I was into the X-Men that we've started collecting again, like all the Jim Lee Claremont, all that stuff, Byrne and all the rest of those guys that were doing X-Men. And then I got into Image and Spider-Man, Mark Bagley, and Mark Bailey. I'm thinking Mike Bailey. Yeah, my trainer. And then Mark Bagley, Spider-Man. And then I discovered Heavy Metal Magazine, and I discovered Simon Bisley. And what's really far out is like I talk to Bisley like once a month, like my old grandpa or older brother or something.
Yeah.
So
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
about finally being able to.
Once you get into comics, it's
like
I don't know if you think this, but like comics is like the smallest world. Once you get to a certain point, we all know each other, and it's super tiny.
I love that about it.
I do too. But seeing Bisley Heavy Metals behind the shelf, and they were kept behind the shelf because it was 18 plus, and I was 13. That changed everything for me. That's where I found Mobius, Manera, Serpieri, Belial. I never looked back at Drie. I never looked back after that. And I was on heavy metal all through high school, all through college. I would get the heavy metal magazine, and my roommate in college would get the Juxtapose magazine, and we were in fine art. And then when I came out and moved to Toronto, that's where I met you guys, and I was playing a lot of catch up with American comics, for sure. When I make comics, I build it like a house. So I get a foundation, I put in like the struts and the beams of the house, and then I build up on top. And when I first met you, I saw you at your table, and you had this big sheet of paper, and you kind of just started at the top and worked all the way down the bottom without making a mark on the page, and it like freaked me out.
Well, I think a lot of that structural stuff you're talking about, it just happens in my head. And it's not like that kind of like photographic memory kind of thing where you envision something and you just see it clearly and draw it. I don't have that. Like I don't see images clearly, but I do have like a series of beats in my head, and I know how I want to flow it down the page. As soon as if I thumbnail that, if I start drawing it out, it kills it.
That's so crazy.
That's why I can't. I've never thumbnailed. I can't do it.
Oh, I have to thumbnail, and my thumbnails are, and we've seen so many people. We've worked with so many people behind the scenes, so you see everyone else's thumbnails, and they range from being like finished work to being like
stick figures
like mine, like just like whip it off on this, like I'll have the script and I whip it off and away we go. But that was that time when we were working and when we were 26 and we were doing webcomics, which I think we were the first guys that were professional comic creators making webcomics. I don't know if you remember that.
We were close.
We were.
There was like Dean Haspiel and some of those guys were, I don't remember what they called themselves, but they were doing webcomics, and we were kind of hot on their heels and lasted a bit longer.
Yeah. Well, you did.
Mine
You're
went
still
for a
going.
long, it's still going. It went for a long time, and it's still kind of going. And Ramon's sort of still doing it. And Cameron finished his. Yeah. So, but yeah, like that was kind of a heady time. But I was thinking about it on my walk here, and thinking about how the stuff that was on my desk then, which was a lot of like manga and like some later superhero stuff, looks nothing like what I surround myself with now, which is all like classics, which is all like the original. Like the original guys, like the original Kirby, Buscema, what else we like, Ditko, and it's stuff that I always appreciated, kind of at a distance, but never really, like until recently, never really truly, just absorbed. Like I read it all, I liked it, I saw why it was important, why it was good, but I think as I get older, like that stuff becomes way more important. And when I surround myself with comics now, that's what I'm surrounding myself with.
Yeah, when I met you, you certainly didn't have any Kirby on your desk or John Byrne or any of that stuff. No. And if I remember correctly, you were just like really, at least from where I was sitting in the studio, you were really influenced by Miyazaki. I found Nausicaa and that kind of stuff. You were like super, super into that. And that kind of like showed in your style. I think that's still there in your style, but you brought up the other day that you were really into Frazzetto too, not Frazzetta, but Frazzetto. Yeah, from the heavy metal era, and he was also, I think, very Nausicaa influence for sure. In
there's
that
it's
book.
like you can like. There's a lot of inspiration from animation around the world. Like that stuff's always sort of informed what I do.
I think animation, specifically like that era of animation where you're thinking about like early 80s, I think is, in my mind, is kind of fueling our comic book company, like Lethal. I think it's really, that's what I feel like I want to be making. Like something that would be in the vein of early 80s, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Silverhawks, Brave Star, into Nausicaa and Speed Racer and that whole era. I'm not necessarily thinking the genre of our comics that we're making is superheroes, but like it's definitely has that flavor.
It's not a genre so much as an energy. Right?
Yeah, it's like an energy.
Yeah.
And like I guess that's why we've gotten into Kirby so hard lately, is because like he's kind of the god of energy. Like in my mind, if I was to come up with like the trifecta or the trinity, like the holy trinity of comic book creators, I used to say Mobius is my favorite, then Atomo, and then Kirby. And after we've kind of like fallen in love with collecting again, I'm definitely thinking Kirby's like on top.
It's all about Kirby.
It's all about Kirby.
Yeah.
Like he's, you know, we look at Byrne and Buscema, and you know how obsessed I am with Buscema. And you have like Will Eisner that I was looking at a lot lately, and Frank Miller. But like all these guys, it all kind of like comes back to Kirby. And I mean, I don't think we would have found that if we didn't kind of like have this like, how did Stella get her groove back moment like a few months ago, where all of a sudden, I think we were just not disillusioned, just bored with media and entertainment. And we went to this store in Montreal called Comic Hunter, which is north of the 40. And there's what, 30,000 comics there.
I think he said he had like 1 million things in the store.
Maybe like 1 million things in the store. And there's that section where it's not even put into the computer yet. They just have it alphabetized in boxes. And we get to go through there and rifle through stuff. You know, and that's where you found, you know, Days of Future Past.
Yeah,
and
I got lucky.
You got lucky,
Yeah.
and you pulled that out, and my whole, that was a Ratatouille moment on a radical shift right there when I saw you pull that comic out, because I remember being like in grade 2 or 3, and one of my friends brought that comic, and it was a superhero comic, but the first thing I can remember is Wolverine's not wearing his costume. He's wearing like a bomber jacket like my grandfather had. Yeah. He had his like crazy hair, and like behind him is all the X-Men that have been murdered. And I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
That comic
Can I tell you something?
just freaked me out.
When we were at the store and I pulled that comic out, I found it just in a random bin. And I took it out and I showed it to you, and it was like I had a Gollum moment. where
I
you
could
were,
tell.
Yeah, you were like,
I could tell.
Give me that. And I was like, no.
Yeah, I did, right? I was like, give me that. Yeah.
And I kind of protect it, and I couldn't even afford it. Like I had to put it away. Like,
what was it, like 100 something?
It was like $100. Like that's the
It's
problem with
even rough.
with all these collecting those comics now is such a problem because
they're so
they're
expensive.
all so expensive, and then we just keep spending money.
It's been like the most worth it thing ever, because I've completely fallen in love with the comics again, because when you work in this industry and you're in almost 30 years now. You started what, when you were 19?
18.
18 was your
first.
That is insane, dude. You were 18 when you worked for DC?
No, not for DC. It was like my first work. My first work was for Lightning Comics.
Okay.
And I was hired when I was 18, I think. And
okay.
Actually, my first work was like I think 2 covers on Green Hornet, which I was never paid for.
Still, that's
now
kind of
comics
awesome.
Screwed me. Yeah. And then Lightning Comics. So I was probably like 18, 19.
Jesus.
And then Marvel a couple years after that.
Yeah, like my first gig wasn't until I was 26, 27. I had like some years where I was in art school, so I was focusing on that. And then I moved to Toronto and had a day job, and I was like doing the hydrometer thing with you guys, but like I kind of like systematically got into that studio by having keg parties.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I
showed up to the
hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the same. But I kind of like showed up to that one Comic-Con, and I rented that. Remember that 57 Oldsmobile?
Yes.
With the green flames?
Yeah.
And my girlfriends at the time were like running around on roller skates, like handing out my comic, and I was selling comics out of the trunk. And I remember you guys,
56?
yeah, and you guys like came over, and you were all part of Raid, and I was like, who's up for a keg party tonight? And you guys are like, whoa, this guy's kind of crazy. So I got invited into the studio, but that's really where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned to make comics, was that early time in Toronto with you guys, you know, meeting all the guys, and then, you know, meeting like Mike Cho and J Bone and of course Darwin Cook, and then, you know, getting to meet the entire like comic industry through that. Like when I became really good friends with Darwin Cook, he was kind of like an older brother at that point. He took me to dinners like with comic book legends like Joe Kubert right before he died, and Sergio Aragonis, and like the Adam and Andy Kubert, and all the guys that were around me that were crazy. Like I was hanging out with Dave Johnson on a regular basis, who like, you know, you talk about those stacks of books that we had where we were like riffing on stuff. I used to like steal from Dave all the time, looking at his sketchbooks. That was a big thing too when we were that age, is everyone had sketchbooks at the Comic-Cons, other artists, and we would everyone else there is for comics, but our crew of dudes, we were running around getting everyone's sketchbook. I remember that was a big thing. That was really, really cool. But I think falling in love with comics again, that's the crazy part. And when you've been in the industry this long, you kind of get bored of comics because you make the stuff. Show me a chef that, is still excited about eating and cooking food 30 years in. You have to keep falling in love with this thing that we do. And a lot of guys don't. We have some friends in Montreal that are, at the top of DC, and they're like, I haven't read a comic in 10 years. You're like, wow.
Well, I was in that place.
Same.
Yeah, there was a long stretch where I didn't read much of anything. I was still making stuff daily, but I didn't read anything. And then recently we started rebuying stuff, and I keep asking myself, I don't now, but I was asking myself, why am I doing this? It's not a collecting bug. I'm prone to the collecting bug. I can definitely get bitten and go all in on collecting something. But I was talking to my wife about it, and I was showing her this old Fantastic Four stuff and some old Spider-Man stuff I bought, and I was showing my kids. And I hold this stuff in such high regard, in part because it feels like when you're holding it, this is Fantastic Four number 42 from when? From 1965.
Yeah.
Okay? This is a piece of history.
Yeah, that's a piece of history.
This was on a newsstand somewhere, and it is now
I don't know if you feel like this, but the older and shittier it is I like it better.
Yeah. I don't care about the condition.
I don't care about condition. In fact, this one I got the other day, the Thor 131, which I'm in love with. This comic was amazing, and it really reminded me. People give Stan a lot of crap, but I was like, his story in here is freaking amazing. His dialogue, his scripting was so good. But if you look, remember when I bought this, and there's more, and I'm gonna get them and bring them on the show. He said that this was just age. But I'm like, no, that looks like fire damage.
Smoke damage.
That's smoke damage,
yeah.
Which makes me love it 100 times more.
Yeah. So I was showing stuff to my kids, and I was trying to.
This is a Coletta, by the way.
I was trying to
Coletta.
Kind of explain to them that this stuff is what our entire what all pop culture, what a significant portion of human culture is based on.
Yeah.
The stuff in these comics.
Yeah.
And there's no denying that. I mean, everything we surround ourselves with is rooted in this.
So this is some of my favorite stuff in the world is Kirby Tech. Kirby he's doing 5 pages a day. So he's just riffing on this stuff. This stuff is just flowing out of his mind in some sort of automatic writing, subconscious mathematical mania that just blows my mind. And if you can't consider this as a genius piece of abstract art, I this could be an 8-foot painting and be the most abstract avant-garde art ever.
This is just one page. I mean, every issue he drew is filled with this. In some ways, I like his Thor stuff maybe almost the best because it seems like the prototype for everything he did in New Gods later.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All of the insane cosmic imagination is happening in these pages.
Do we have some? Yeah, look at this paste up thing. And obviously the newsprint couldn't handle whatever was happening with the print job on this, so it's completely faded out. Yeah. But it's crazy too. Yeah. Let's do a paste up. Do we have any Kirby Crackle in this?
This might be pre.
Is it pre Kirby Crackle? So Kirby Crackle is all that.
We're not Kirby scholars. I don't know when the Crackle began, but look at this.
There's probably, this is from 65. So in 65, would he have been?
Here's some Kirby Space Crackle.
There it is. That's Kirby Crackle right there. That's getting into it. It's basically his signature. This is my explosion / mystic space go-to shortcut for drawing that kind of stuff that is just and the energy, look at the energy that's happening here. I mean, you look at Buscema, Here's a Buscema Thor.
Okay, before we get into this,
Wow.
I want you to, because
So cool.
John Buscema was a guy I always super respected, but to me he was like the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way guy,
Yeah,
right?
I can see
Which is no slouch. I mean,
Yeah,
that's this
no.
amazing book. But I never really sought after his comics until I started seeing some of this old Thor stuff and
Yeah.
realized that
This is how much we don't care about, like,
Yeah.
this is how much we don't care about the quality. Someone signed their name on the front of this comic.
yeah, look at me. Like this is Buscema inked by Vinnie Coletta, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these panels might as well be Kirby panels.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yep.
like I wasn't a big follower of Conan and stuff, so I wasn't that familiar
Yeah.
with a lot of Buscema, but I have a whole new appreciation looking at these books.
Yeah.
But what made you seek these out? Like, what did you?
Well, I
see
mean,
in them?
I was definitely after the Simonson Thors, but when I started going through it, I'm such a Conan fan, especially Buscema Conan, that I completely blanked on the fact that Buscema had done a giant run on Thor. So coming after Kirby into these, the only difference really, it has all the same energy. A lot of the decisions feel the same. The big difference is I think that maybe his anatomy was a little better or different, you know what I mean? Like in a classical sense. And, he had rounder edges. Kirby was so much boxier. That pose is so dope. For me, you can love Superman, but I feel like in a lot of ways, maybe Marvel, Thor is Marvel's Superman. The more I'm reading this stuff lately, I think Thor is kind of like their Superman, and his design is just so great, and they have the big red cape. They both have giant red capes. Look at that. Look at this business happening in here.
Is this a Kirby design? Because this is all.
I think so, but this is Kirby Crackle kind of stuff right in here, and it looks like it's pasted in. Like with these old comics, right? Being on newsprint.
That's just overcolored.
Is that just overcolor?
overprinted,
This is
yeah.
the color. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
I have something to show you that I haven't even looked at yet.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
I
excited.
picked these up. I found these. Haven't even opened them.
Oh, what's this?
Haven't even opened them. It is two Journey into Mysteries pre-Thor getting his own series.
My God.
It's like Kirby Thor on Journey. You wanna
Okay,
open
you have to
them?
open
You
them.
open one.
Okay, I'll
open
open one. You open
We'll
one.
We'll have a look at these.
Oh my God, look at that. Oh my God. Where did you get these ones?
I bought them from a guy online.
Are you saving them just for this?
Yeah,
Oh,
look at this.
that's why you're the best.
So this is, so this
my
is Kirby
God.
inked by Chick Stone in, when is this?
Also, look at this ad.
1964.
Come on, get out there. Work out. Wow.
So different. Like this
So
looks
different.
like a
I-
Simonson line.
Yeah,
What do you
totally.
think? Like that looks like a pen or
Also,
something.
this looks like a panel from Buscema. It's so great, but that's unmistakably Kirby. Yeah, this inker is pretty wild.
Chick Stone. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nothing like his usual.
Yeah, that's wild. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, this is really great stuff. Thor's design is just so rad. So rad. There's a lot of
Oh man. Also, I noticed Kirby. He's not afraid to hide faces.
no.
Like he'll do giant action shots
Yeah.
of the main character where their head is buried behind their torso. Like you
Yeah.
can't see Thor hardly at all of these, but it's
Yeah,
still
that's cool.
amazing.
That's
With
super
Loki
cool.
sniffing a posy.
Wow, and you gotta love the ads. What's with this monkey?
I don't know. I think you can
That's
buy a
amazing. You
monkey.
can buy a
for
monkey.
$19.
Yep. Oh my gosh, a monkey for $18? That's awesome. Oh, look at this. Don't you think he's kind of like, Marvel's Superman in this era?
He definitely, these stories definitely remind me of I don't remember what the ages are. What was the age of Superman where he was there was all the,
Oh, whoa.
nice.
That's awesome.
Where he was dealing with multicolored kryptonite and it was
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
Superman was always the stories were always weirdly domestic, you know?
Yeah. You know what's weird for me with these Thor comics is you get to a certain point and it ends after 22 pages or 17 pages or whatever, and there's a backup story to fill in the rest. But Kirby does the backup.
He's like, yeah, I might as well just
He's like,
do this.
I don't think I've done enough this week. Let's do the backup story too.
This looks like stuff out of Asgardian Wars. This is Kirby inked by Coletta again, and it looks completely different.
Yeah, it does look completely different.
From the Chick Stone King.
I don't know. I'm going to just throw this out there. A lot of people give Coletta a hard time, right? But Coletta was probably the guy really cranking it out to get the books out on time. And
I like his textures.
That I
and
understand.
Stuff too.
I don't.
He
dig it.
He gets shit mostly for erasing stuff.
Yeah.
Right, like not inking stuff.
All right, let's get into this Thor.
Journey into Mystery. So I think Journey into Mystery ended at issue 126, and then it just became Thor.
Yeah.
With the same numbering.
Look at the Destroyer. So cool. We don't have a Destroyer statue in the studio. We need we need a Destroyer. Oh, look at all this fishing gear, man. That makes me want to go fishing.
We'll do an episode from a boat.
From a boat, yeah. Come check out our comics as we're casting it. Whoa, look at how it's bled over the years, like the ink is bled into the newsprint. That's another thing.
That's the other reason I like buying the originals, because I don't like most reprints because they correct the colors. And I want to see, I like the bleeding onto the newsprint.
Yeah, it's great. I think the newsprint is just great. Like I pick up a modern comic and I can't stand the paper.
It's not that I'm like into imperfections so much. It's that like the ink bleeds into newsprint in a way that it muddies the line just enough to let you interpret things differently. Yeah. You know, I don't like really crisp, perfect reproductions of the artwork. I want a little bit of.
You mean like the Fourth World one you have over there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at the Destroyer, he's so cool. And just so that you know he's metal, he just like, this giant brushstroke, yeah, there you know.
Yeah, and we'll do one lighter color just to indicate a highlight here.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah. Hey, we have this comic on the table.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Where'd it go? There it is.
There it is.
Crazy. X-ray vision. Man. I love how everyone wanted to get X-ray vision and they thought that would be like give you the power to see people with their clothes off.
Yeah, that's all you wanted it for.
Yeah, but it like clearly wouldn't work.
No one wants to see
their
skeleton.
bones. You would just see their bones. It's so ridiculous. So I was watching this thing the other day, and there's this great part on Kirby was doing what, 5 pages a day, 4 books a month at one point, just putting out volumes of work on a level that we can't even really fathom. Like we get if we work our asses off, we can do a book a month. But I mean, he was penciling. We pencil and ink. But even still, penciling 4 books a month is inhuman. And penciling 5 pages a day also seems very inhuman.
If you look at, I mean, yeah, it's easy to dismiss his speed as being just a penciler. But if you look at these pencils,
look at the pencils,
like
they're
like this is
like he's doing 5 of these a day.
Yeah, that is really tight penciling. Like way tighter than you would imagine.
Absolutely. This is a Kirby reader. I used to get these at Dragon Lady back in Toronto.
These are great.
Yeah, I've had these for years. Yeah, so this is Kirby's pencil work. And he was doing, 5 pages of this a day.
Yeah.
Is just bonkers. The speed would have been just radical. Look at this Kirby tech. Like he's busting out rulers. He's just like
are these
just kicking it.
Circles? I think
those look like no. I bet you had a circle template there. I hope he did. Otherwise, I feel really bad and I can't draw curves.
I mean, that's a super detailed room.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he's just busting a move, and it's all rulered out. That's crazy. The thing with this is all of the conversations that are happening in his comics are happening during action. And I can't remember what comic book it was, but Darwin Cook was given a script for something, and he didn't like the way it was going. So he decided to take Catwoman and do the whole comic, but also at the same time, she was going to be like committing a heist or a robbery at the same time.
Same script, but
same script
re-choreographed.
added.
Yeah.
So the speaking parts and everything, instead of being talking heads, were happening during action sequences. So it wasn't a slice of life comic when it was happening. It was, concentrating on that these are action comics. And I think that's what really helped sell the genre of American comics for the most part when it came to Marvel, DC, and a lot of these companies, is they really focused on action that made it pop, that made it exciting. And, that's what really attracts me to this stuff again. When I look at these comics now, they're exploding off the pages at me. Like, look at this Mr. Miracle, just like that thing's exploding off the page in line and color.
Yeah, it's never boring. It's a visual medium, right? So like every, even if people are having a humdrum domestic conversation, there's still a lot visually going on.
That Mr. Miracle shot is
this is my favorite one.
Oh, is that? This is
with
your
the
favorite
funky
one?
Flashman.
Funky Flashman?
Yeah, where he's
cool.
trolling Stan. I think this is the only Mr. Miracle I brought over here, but it's not the most dynamic one because but it's got some great Big Barda stuff in here.
Big Barda's amazing. Oh, look at her. She's like Lady Conan. So cool. When you look at these ones, these 2001s, I don't know how much you've read of these. I read
this one, which is my favorite one.
Okay.
And actually, when I read it, I noticed that it's for Kirby doing his own thing with 2001, it's remarkably close tonally to, I shouldn't say tonally, but thematically to 2001. It's all like death, life, rebirth kind of origins of the cosmos kind of stuff. Like, this is a great story, actually, about this woman who, like, it takes her from kind of like cave woman.
Such a dope drawing.
Yeah, cave woman to like modern age.
Wait, was that the monolith from the film?
I think the monolith is in there.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, but these are so good. Like they're really. They feel like his voice.
Oh yeah.
It's what I like about them a lot. Like compared to like reading Thor or something scripted by Stan.
What are these guys doing?
Those are Bionic. That's Steve Austin.
Steve Austin, right there.
Was it Steve Austin?
I think it's Steve Austin. Yeah, look at that shot. The shot of her is like fantastic. So good. Makes me want to draw. Like he did like, what was it, a 2H or like regular just black school pencil on paper?
Yep.
Kind of want to hit that again. You get the black hand.
It's dark too.
Yeah.
Like it's a dark pencil. It's a soft lead.
You get the black hand. Yeah, this stuff is great. Which one was I reading the other day?
I got the black hand.
Okay,
pop.
I got the black hand pop covered in lead. I was reading this one the other day, and I remember thinking, this is the closest thing you can get to being on drugs without being on drugs. Reading a comic I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, look at
Opens up to this business. This is like you're doing a lot of acid and mushrooms in one fell. Like, look at that. One fell swoop. Look at
Inked
this.
and lettered by Mike Royer.
Yep.
Lettered it too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
This comic is wild. Just completely bananas.
I don't know what's happening.
This one felt like, I mean, there's the monolith, but this one didn't feel like it belongs with the movie at all. It is completely in a Kirby universe with insane characters. So wild. I was
You want
checking
to talk
out.
wild? Keep going.
Yeah. I was checking out this doc on Kirby the other day, and I'd seen it before, but I just wanted to like watch again. And there was this part where they're talking about his home life and his wife and his kids, or his kids are being interviewed. And there's a section where Kirby was so in his own head when it came to making comics and stories, like he couldn't really operate a car. Like he would like drive off the road.
Just
like he wasn't driving fast, but he would just like be talking to whoever was beside him in the passenger seat about the stories so much.
Or just daydreaming.
Daydreaming, yes, the daydreaming. Now, and he would like run off the road. And for me, I never really realized I did that, but my wife has definitely called me on it for years. And after she watched that doc, she was like, "Oh, that's what it's like. You're like in your own head with your comic book stories almost 100% of the time. So any periphery thing that's happening, like, hey, do the dishes, hey, do this stuff, it's kind of like it doesn't even register with you because there's like stories happening in your brain. And I was like, yes, that's what it's like. I'm daydreaming almost all day. There are scenes happening and replaying in my head over and over. They're often connected to music. So I'll have like, you know, a scene in my head. Like I have a scene in my head to one of the new Tool songs on the newest Tool album that came out in 2019. I guess that's not that new, right? 2020.
It feels new.
But, you know, it's a whole scene with the Punisher going through a building, wasting all these dudes. Wolverine is on his side. He's doing stuff. He ends up fighting Kingpin all the way outside of this building after he's been through like an old boy gauntlet of dudes. And as he's about to finally kill the Kingpin with a handgun, and he also has a minigun, the storm, it's raining, there's a storm, Galactus shows up. And Silver Surfer comes out of the clouds and the rain and the storm. And instead of shooting Kingpin, Punisher just freaks out and grabs a minigun and unloads on the Silver Surfer. Because he's like crazy. And while the Silver Surfer is being like shot at and bullets flying all over him, Silver Surfer looks into the psyche of the Punisher, and it's just his daughter like screaming for him to kill. Almost like Jason. And I've had this story, and I've actually like thumbnailed it out and plotted this comic I want to do that would never be made by Marvel. So I've never actually drawn it because it seems silly to do a Marvel comic without, you know, having Marvel do it. But if I ever had to do a Punisher, that would be it. So he wastes the Silver Surfer to this song by Tool, and then he jumps into a helicopter with Wolverine and flies that shit right into Galactus and dies. But like, that's my day all day. There's these scenes with like my own characters, Marvel characters, all these things happening 100% of the time. And like, you know, my wife has often been like, you're like not absent-minded professor, but more like you're not always there. Like you're sitting in front of us on the couch, but you're like, it's like you're not there. You're drawing or whatever, and your brain is just like in a completely other place, where she's had full conversations with me and I don't remember any of them. Because
I'm checked out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like in that way, especially if I'm listening to music. If I'm walking in the shower, running, listening to music, like that's all what you're describing. I think that's just music videos, right? Like I think that makes sense that a lot of like storytellers and film directors start out with music videos because it just evokes very potent, clear imagery that you don't have to worry about story so much. You just have these like sort of like images that resonate that you need to get down on.
I feel like that's why I like right when Tarantino came out with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and I saw them in the theater when I was in high school, everything was set to music. I clicked with it immediately because that's sort of what was happening in my brain already. These scenes would play out to music 100% of the time. And that's how I write my comics. I come up with that stuff, these scenes, and often I will have the climax of the comic in my head that was a daydream that I've been going over and over and over and over and over and over for years. And then I come up with the rest of the story and reverse engineer my stories to hit that climax that's in my head. Yeah. But like this 2001 stuff is like the most far out stuff.
I might be able to one-up you.
All right, there we go.
With the first issue of OMAC.
Oh yeah. Is that Big Barda?
Look at this first page. No.
Oh my gosh.
It's Lila.
That is the craziest
friend
thing ever. Build a friend.
Yeah.
That is some wild stuff, man.
Yeah. This stuff's.
I've seen this picture before. Look at this. Does this not look like the thing that we just saw in 2001? Where did it go? Hang on. Go back to that double page spread.
It looks like Gladiator from X-Men.
It does look like Gladiator, but look.
Oh yeah, basically the same spread.
It's like the same spread almost. Oh, but all these ladies are coming out of these boxes. But it feels like the same thing. It's cool, the same layout. It's really neat. Wow, look at that. That's so wild. Like, how much of you do you think comes out of this?
I wish it was more. You know, like one of the things I struggle with is that, I absorb all this and I appreciate the raw energy of it. And when I sit down to actually work, everything comes out way too controlled.
Right.
Like I'm not as loose as I want to be. I'm not as energetic as like the initial sketches are energetic, and then I tend to, I don't overwork it, but my sensibilities are so set in the way I trained myself that it's hard to veer away from like really finished lines and certain shapes. And I wish I could kind of unlearn a lot of that stuff.
Look at the Kirby crackle.
Yeah.
Snap, crackle, and pop right there. It's crazy. What a weird design. I guess it's meant to be like a Roman soldier kind of mixed with a mohawk.
Yeah, I don't know too much about OMAC.
Yeah.
Other than he's the one-man Army Corps.
He's the one-man Army Corps. Yeah.
This OMAC I remember having to draw like on the, like there were like revamped OMACs when I was drawing Superman.
Yeah.
And there were all sorts of like these OMAC sort of androids or beings, and they all had that sort of symbol.
I've done a few commissions of OMAC. People have asked me for OMAC before, yeah.
I have not.
Oh, really?
Anyway, that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, that's a wild comic.
I told
you! If you really think about it, like you get into Mother Trucker, like my comic that I'm doing with Lethal, and I just saw this today, and I was like,
but that's not conscious. Like
that's unconscious.
You're not emulating a Kirby composition on purpose. It just comes out.
It just comes out. Like I'm wondering, is the evolution of what we're doing? We've seen so much comic book work. Are we?
Well, part of it is that
like
so much of the genres we work in are rooted in what Kirby had done.
Yeah. Like now that I'm looking at Lethal stuff, the paper we use and everything in modern printing and modern comics is so slick. And then, I see this and I was like, I'm like, oh, if this just was here, like this oldness.
The more work I do, the more I want to simplify.
Yeah.
Like I want to go back to cheaper paper, flatter colors, less rendering.
My goal with this, with Mother Trucker, was I was trying to emulate the color style to be like early image. I wanted this to feel like an early image comic in a lot of ways. Yeah, like, getting into some of this stuff.
Yeah.
That's definitely like my Kirby kind of coming out. Mother Trucker, I wanted all the men and truckers in the comic, which is it's essentially a wrestling comic, but with space wrestling. I wanted them all to look like He-Man figures. Mm-hmm. So that way, if we ever made toys, it's like, you just use that He-Man body. It was kind of my idea. And then Mother Trucker was meant to be this sort of, because originally the comic was meant to be Truck Off, and then I switched it to Mother Trucker after I spent all that time in Italy, and it became sort of like mixed with all the stuff I was seeing in Italy.
That's what's interesting.
Almost
to
like a
me,
Monera character wandered into He-Man.
That's what's interesting to me about Mother Trucker is that like, I know when you talked about doing it before you were working on it, like I know what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like I understand the He-Man wrestling part of it, but there's so much Italy in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It becomes a completely other thing.
Yeah, it's totally a different thing. And I mean,
like it's way more like it's way more statuesque. Like it's not at all what I.
There's an ad for
you.
Yeah, for
it's not
wrestling.
at all what I was expecting. It's like this weird hybrid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so much fun. We pulled this out today. It was like the Marvel swimsuit issue, and I was telling you my fourth issue of Mother Trucker is definitely going to be a swimsuit issue. Swimsuit issue.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that at some point.
Time.
But if we look at your book, again, like look at the movement on the front cover. Have you ever seen that Kurosawa sort of like thing on YouTube where they talk about Kurosawa and movement?
Yes. Yeah.
This reminds me of that. You have a static image, but there's so much movement going on in the background, and she's stoic in that movement. it makes her seem like a master of her environment. It's subtle,
I
but
think
it's
a lot
there.
about, you ever watched, there were other, someone was analyzing Spielberg's filmmaking or directorial style.
Yeah.
And the way he would, I think about this when I'm composing panels, the way he would accentuate movement in a certain direction by showing a lot of action moving in the opposite direction.
Right.
Like you'd follow your main figures a certain way, but there's a lot of stuff in the foreground and background all kind of moving against it. So it's like, it's stuff for the eye to take in, but it's also really reinforcing the movement of the main
That's
characters.
cool. Man, look at that.
This stuff I just wanted to.
This is some wild panel design right here, man.
I'd come
That's
back
crazy.
from Japan and just wanted to do manga stuff. This stuff I did all like during COVID when everyone was kind of pencils down.
Yeah. It's so good though. Awesome. This negative line work's really neat. But yeah, I mean, you know, you can still kind of like, you know, there's hints of Kirby action and it's a lot of it.
There's a lot of speed lines.
Yeah.
Like this kind of stuff I was trying to do more.
Yeah, that's
motion
great.
and
It works
speed
though.
lines.
It works really, really well. I love those sound effects too. Do you know what I do for sound effects? I go back and I find as much Alex Toth as I can, and I'll take like a screen cap of it and then either print it or put it into my stuff digitally and trace over the sound effects so that I'm just using the exact same sound effects as Alex Toth.
Yeah, why not?
Because
Can't
I
improve on
remember
perfection.
the first time looking at Alex Toth, all his sound effects were the thing that really blew my mind. There was so much of it, and I have one of his books where there's like a surf story in it with the Ratfink guy, the Ratfink artist, and he's surfing in it. And I remember the sound effects were in every panel, all over the place, and it changed the way I thought about comics in a lot of ways. It wasn't just I'm drawing this panel. It was like, how do I use sound effects in every single panel to create either horror or suspense or action? Like, how is that sound effect adding design-wise to my page, as opposed to it's an afterthought you just slap on? No, how is it like a part of it? And Frank Quitely's Batman and Robin that he did with Grant Morrison, I remember I had that again in the way that he was actually drawing,
Just
the
incorporated into the
sound
actual
effects and
environment.
smoke or
Yeah.
whatever. And I was just blown away by the way Quitely used sound effects, and that is a big part of what we do, is the sound effects. And like, look at the speed. You know, the movement is carried through in your sound effects. It's
I've been
awesome.
thinking a lot more about sound effects in recent years.
Yeah.
Like I used to sort of eschew sound effects and also narration
Yeah.
and like thought balloons and stuff like that. And now I love all of that stuff.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, and then you get into color here.
Yeah, then I do a color segment.
That's so good. Wow, look at that.
I was thinking, if you put Death Transit Tanager beside Mother Trucker, like I don't know that either one of them captures the kind of like 90s vibe we were going for. Like they kind of get there in their own way. They're very different.
Yeah.
And I think about what Lethal Comics is, what the sort of philosophy is, like the visual philosophy or like the storytelling philosophy. And these are two really different books. Like if someone pitched me either of these, I don't know what I would say. Like I don't know if I would choose to make them, but like they're very personal.
Yeah, they're both very personable.
Like I don't look at these two books and think, oh, these are from the same line, like these are from the same publisher.
Sure.
And I kind of like that.
I kind of like it too, but I think we have a lot of. I think we're influenced by the same thing, and you were coming out with stuff, that feels very different because you and I have such unique voices. I think in the work that we do.
Well, one of the things that fascinates me is that like our tastes are, like, with a few like major exceptions, like our tastes are pretty similar. Like we listen to a lot of the same music. We watch. We love a lot of the same movies.
Yeah.
Like games, everything.
Yeah.
But like your your like wrestling horror background, and my kind of like animation, like manga background, it nudges them apart significantly.
Oh yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
It's just like, it's almost like two entirely different worldviews, despite the fact that we're kind of into the same stuff.
I always thought that's what worked with when it got to be just you and I in the studio together. Like I know we were at Lunac and there was a lot of other artists, but it was kind of, you and I were like the main artists that were, part of, almost more of a global thing, like a North American comic thing. Like we were, the Anglos, working on our stuff. I felt like in a lot of ways I was like the wild man and you were the straight man in the scenario, or like, I was Riggs and you were Murtaugh. Like if you're gonna think about Lethal Weapon,
that's accurate.
You're right.
Yeah.
Like,
are you Tango or Cash?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'd have to. No, in that one, Stallone. Which one's Stallone again in that one? Is he
I don't
Tango?
know. I can't remember.
I think I'm Kurt Russell in that one.
I think he's Tango.
But like Stallone was like wearing like the glasses and trying to be more of a straight man in Tango and Cash, I think. And Kurt Russell was more of the wild man, I think, in that one. Right. But that's always been like the dynamic I've seen. And it comes in our comics. Like Mother Trucker's like screaming. You know what I mean?
I can't help but add like melancholy
to
whatever I'm working on. I don't know why. Like it could be a horror book, it could be an action book, but there's still like some kind of sadness or like emotional trauma.
Well, this is almost like, I think if someone picked this up, they might think you're goth. Like maybe
just
you
based
have
on
goth sensibilities.
Yeah.
Or even if they read the story, it feels like a very, like it has a lot of goth sensibilities. That's why when you got on Batman, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is gonna be, and you were like, I'm doing a vampire story. I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's perfect. But my stuff has always been like loud. My work
heavy.
is always loud and heavy. Yeah, like, it's sort of, I think Kirby has all these things built into his work. But, that's where we were coming with the Lethal Comics stuff. We wanted to do stuff that was, our own voice. And in a lot of cases, I don't think it's necessarily fantastic to be working for companies all the time where you're hooked up with a writer or you're out of your own box. I think the act of writing and drawing your own comic book, if you're a comic book creator, is sort of like the most important thing. It's like the distilled creation in one place. I don't know.
I'd like to talk about this in the future.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into this now, but there is I agree with all of that, but there is sometimes a sense of relief when you're working on someone else's script and you're just like, oh, thank God I don't have to write this. Thank God I don't have to think about this.
You don't have the pressure.
Yeah, I'm just going to draw what's here, and there's not the pressure to be.
Yeah, you don't have the pressure of people judging you by your story. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're doing someone else's script, you're judged by they get judged by their story, and you don't. You're just judged by your art, unless in a lot of cases people just fly by the art and it's all about the story. So, but in this case, we're judged by our stories, and I think in every scenario that I've ever gotten in, when someone, and I think you can attest for this, when someone sees something that I wrote and drew as opposed to something I just drew. Everyone, all my fans, all the people I know, including, you've said this before, if I'm writing and drawing my own stuff, it's always stronger. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because it has heart. It has more heart. I don't know what you think about that, but if you think about the way Kirby worked on his books, right? He didn't get scripts. He laid out the whole story, and then Stan would write the dialogue over top. Stan might have been in a meeting where he said, there's a guy that looks like a spider. Go for it.
Well, it's in those. It's on those pages in the Kirby Collector. You can see where Jack is writing the story.
Yeah. So
I don't want to get into what did Stan contribute or not contribute, because I think there's a lot of contribution. But yeah, it's definitely an indication that Kirby was a story machine.
Yeah.
Like he just had a lot to get off his chest.
When I'm buying comics, when we're at Comic Hunter and we're collecting all these old comics again and reading them and like falling in love with the medium again, and remembering a time when everything was about getting this periodical. While I'm reading these comics, I can barely control myself from wanting to stop reading to get back to drawing my own stuff. I'm like always struggling because I'm so inspired looking at all of, like, oh my gosh. I'm always so inspired by looking at this work that I'll get through 3 pages and often stop reading and pick it up later so that I can go draw more.
Yeah.
It's
I'll tell you what it does
fuel.
for me is it gives me hope. Because when I open these books and I think, let's say I've woken up depressed or I've become jaded, and I think, we're just living in an era of nostalgia. All the great ideas have been done. Like everything has been done to death 100 times. And then you open this and you think, oh, no, it hasn't.
No.
Like this is like, no one is doing this.
No.
Like, I'm not sure if anyone has done this since Kirby did it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's there. Like, you want to strive for this every time you look at it. So I mean, I've completely fallen in love with the medium again. I'm like excited to be at the table every day, or the digital space or the paper. I'm pumped to be there after looking at these comics again. Like, I'm absolutely charged. It's the coolest stuff ever, and I guess every artist has to go through that phase where they've worked on stuff. This is what got them into it. But then they, after making the soup for years and years and years, you get kind of jaded by it, or, things don't go your way and you forget about what got you into it in the first place. And having this thing where we've been collecting comics again and reading these old comics, I feel more energized about what we do. And I don't really care about, if this becomes animation or a movie or any of that stuff or a video game. It all goes by the wayside because all that matters is the comic. All that matters is the medium of comics.
Well, I think about what you said before about Otomo and Mobius. And I think, like, obviously all masters, like Otomo, master storyteller, master technician. Mobius always felt to me like he was delving into the human psyche. Everything he did felt like
totally.
like very, very much very human, but like in an otherworldly, almost ethereal kind of like LSD trip kind of way.
Especially his Desert Days books.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But Kirby, like this Kirby's work is like a primal scream.
Totally.
From like primordial man, like it feels like something like being unearthed. It feels like a human, like mythic cry. You know what I mean?
He's like a juggernaut.
It's so
of creativity.
it's so from the gut.
Yeah.
That I just think it trumps everything.